My name is Jennifer Lease, and I am Associate Vice Provost for Enrichment Programs and Director of the Honors Program at the University of Connecticut. Jaclyn, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Jaclyn Chancey, and I am the Director for Curriculum Assessment and Planning for Enrichment Programs and an Associate Director with the Honors Program. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the PowerPoint so that we can just dive right in.
I'll start by, again, thanking you for the warm introduction and the perfect setup for what Jaclyn and I want to share today with our participants, which is really the ways that we have changed our model for honors education at UConn to focus on talent development and preparing students to be leaders for change, for the social good in particular. So we will get into those details very shortly. I do want to add that it's particularly fitting, I think, in this last year and a half of constant change for us to finally be able to be together and talk about these issues and how we can continue to prepare our students for all the things that face them in the world. And the idea of moving forward stronger is one that certainly resonates with us, as well as the concepts of helping students to prepare students to apply their skills and talents to change the world that we find at Houndstooth University. So we're really thrilled to be joining you. We will certainly leave time for question and answers at the end. There is a Q&A function, so you can feel free to pop something in there, and one of the two of us will try to get to that or make sure that we have that of note in the at the end of the presentation, or as we go if we can. I know Jaclyn's driving the PowerPoint for us this morning, so her view is a little bit limited, but we're both multitaskers, so we'll do our best to manage both of those things. So one of the things that we wanted to share was just this overarching question with you. How can we help students positively contribute to societal change? That's certainly a question for this conference, but it's also a question that we began asking about 7 years ago now. I've been fortunate to be at UConn for, I'm finishing up year 18. Jaclyn's been here not quite as long. I think she's year 9, maybe 10. We do lose track at some point. But this is something that, as I stepped into the role of Director of Honors, was a key point for me, and part of why I recruited Jaclyn to our team, because I wanted to reevaluate our requirements to fit a 21st century education. And so really we're going to be talking about how the UConn Honors experience answers these questions and the ways that we have shaped our requirements to fit theories, specifically theories of talent development. So one of the things that Jaclyn and I absolutely believe is that whether or not you have a theoretical framework, you are certainly operating on one. You either have an explicit one that you've ascribed to, or you're operating on implicit theories about what works, what's important, how to actually motivate students to participate and achieve the outcomes you want to as part of their educational experience. So theory is always informing our practice. One of our goals was to be more explicit about that and to really think about why we do what we do in honors. We needed to be able to convey to students why an honors education was worth pursuing, and in fact what made it different from an already outstanding UConn education. That differential is a piece that we absolutely wanted to explore with our students and our faculty and staff. So one of the things that that really struck out to us, because both Jaclyn and I have backgrounds in histories and gifted education as part of our own doctoral work, was thinking about which theory really fit our university and fit our framework, you know, what we believe to be true about not only our students, but the mission of our university and our overarching goals for honors education. We were absolutely motivated to broaden access to honors. That was something that was pivotal for both of us, which includes you know, really not looking at, for example, a gifted student approach that's focusing on talent and characteristics and abilities, if you will, but thinking more about talent, actually. It was talent that I think fit us for what we wanted to accomplish. We strongly believe that students grow and develop at different stages and at different points in their lives, and that sometimes it's college before those things, those talents and passions really begin to blossom. So the sort of identification model of gifted students are really concentrating on traits and characteristics just didn't resonate with the kind of honors program and honors experience we wanted to have. One of the things that's certainly been and really influential in the past year and a half too is that our own theories from talent development have helped us define those goals, which in the middle of a pandemic has been also helpful. So knowing our why has helped us not only in the pre-work that we've done over the last 6-7 years to prepare for students to be coming into these new requirements, but also in how we keep focus on those requirements as everything around us is changing, shifting to virtual environments, and really helping our students cope with how learning is different in over the last year and a half in the pandemic. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jaclyn now. She's going to start in with more explication of theories. And Jaclyn, you're up.
Okay. So we formally adopted the new theoretical framework in 2016, and it uses 3 interrelated theories. As Marcus said, we use the work of Joseph Renzulli and Sally Reese. They're both UConn Board of Trustees, distinguished professors. And of course, Joe is doing a Q&A at this conference tomorrow, so definitely catch that. And you may have seen some of these theories in his video that he provided, so I don't want to repeat too much. But quickly, the first one is the 3-ring conception of giftedness. And as Marcus said, we're talking about those gifted behaviors, creative productivity. And that's when you have the above average ability, which might be specific or general, but it doesn't have to be outstanding, just above average. Creativity and task commitment, and they all intersect around a real problem of interest. So again, there's a big piece is that it's directed towards something and about doing something, not just being really good at classes. And for us, this theory, it defines our goal. We are looking for this behavior by the time our students graduate. This is what we're trying to help them achieve. And it also informs our identification practices. Because that is our goal, we're not looking for students who already have this. We are looking for students who have the potential to get this. So the 3 rings don't all have to be the same size. The bigger one is, or the others, or all 3, obviously the more chances you have for that intersection to happen. The second model, the enrichment triad model, this actually tells us how do you get there. So it also uses a triad, a group of 3, but it's not the same 3. So we're talking about different types of enrichment activities, which could be courses, they could be co-curricular activities, programming, student organizations, lots of different ways to deliver enrichment. But there's 3 things. The first one is exploration. And if you think back to those 3 rings and they're intersecting on a problem, exploration is helping them find that problem. So find the spot where you want your rings to intersect. Then type 2 is where you're developing skills. So you might think of that as changing the size of one or more of those rings, or giving students the opportunity to develop and show creative productivity, to practice bringing those rings together. And what does that look like? And so again, we can do this through honors courses, through contract work, so adding on to existing courses to make them honors, but then also outside the classroom in our other programming. And then the final theory that we've used is Operation Houndstooth. And if you noticed on the previous slide with the 3 rings, it was on a houndstooth background, and it has been for decades. And in his more recent work, Joe's been working towards, okay, these are these factors that contribute to actually getting those rings in alignment. So we know that students can have above average ability, creativity, and task commitment, but what actually gets them to bring them together, and specifically to bring them together toward the social good. So what influences them to demonstrate creative productivity and to demonstrate that in an area that is going to be helpful to society. So now we're getting back to that central question. And so there are the 6 factors: optimism, courage, romance with a topic or discipline, sensitivity to human concerns, physical, mental energy, vision, sense of destiny. We may not be able to directly address all of them through programming or through a course. It's really hard to teach directly, have courage. But they are things that we can support through our programming, especially outside the classroom in our residence halls. It also informs this holistic approach towards our service learning initiatives, our residential hall support for individual students, and so on.
So again, we're back to this sort of central idea that a UConn honors education, is about preparing students to make those contributions to their field through their own creative productivity and their sharing of information with the world. We talk a lot about helping students move from consumers of knowledge to producers of knowledge. And it is that process and indeed sharing it out as part of their thesis and the communication that they're doing and some of the other structural elements of honors that kind of gets us to this point of being able to share their work and to do so in a way that is making positive contributions to society. So one of the things I would add here that I think is important to note is that this theoretical model works for us on a variety of levels. First of all, it is very situated to place and context. So Marka mentioned that UConn is the home of the National Research Center for the Gifted and Talented, and it's also the home of Joe Renzulli and Sally Reese, who are internationally world known in the field of gifted education. So the fact that we were using theories built by Joe and Sally is a very appropriate thing for UConn. It also, again, fit with our implicit models. So it was a almost like a grounded theory approach to looking around and figuring out, well, what were the things that were important to us, and how do we find theories that further elucidate and inform our practice that related to those things. So we weren't making a huge shift. We were making a more focused shift to this new model. It also fits with UConn's mission, which is certainly to educate the citizens of Connecticut, but also the citizens of the world, and helping those students be ready and prepared to make social change in the world. And over the past 2 years, UConn has also launched an initiative called Life Transformative Education, which is a larger goal for every UConn student to have an educational experiences as part of their undergraduate curriculum that help them build their identity, their sense of advocacy, and their sense of purpose. And that is achieved through experiential learning and strong mentoring relationships. So this initiative in particular is another area of congruence for us. So as our university is focusing on this, one of the things that we realized immediately was that this very closely aligned to the things that we're doing in terms of the new honors requirements and our own theories about talent development. So I think having that institutional alignment and mission and vision working together is part of what strengthens our overall ability to really implement and be successful with this model. So next, we're ready to talk about what that really means. Like, what does it look like? What are the elements of practice that put our theory to the test, right? So certainly we've talked about Renzulli, but really we embarked on a 2-year collaborative process. One of the things that I learned personally from this is that as excited as I was to make these changes, having a pace for shaping them and implementing them and continuing to pull in multiple people, multiple viewpoints was really what added strength and depth and resonance to our work itself. So we created a task force. We had representatives from faculty at every school and college. We had students involved in the creation of these new requirements, and the rich conversations that came from this really absolutely were formative to the work that you're going to see here, and the sort of examples of putting this theory into practice that we're going to share with you now.
And we did have to do a good bit of translation, because as canonical as Renzulli's work is, it's been in primary, elementary, secondary classrooms, and that's where the research and the implementation guides have been. So for us, we had to really translate that into a decentralized university environment, which just is very different from previous work. So it was an exciting time. So this is a very brief overview of the new, and we're going to call them awards because, you know, requirement sounds harsh, but these are what they're striving towards at the end. Now, there are 3 items here that are underlined, and we're going to cover those in the following slides, because they're actually those type 3 activities. Those are the ones where the students are demonstrating and practicing creative productivity. But overall, what we have are 2 interlocking awards. So all students who graduate from the honors program graduate with honors scholar in the major. So that's that depth of study and specifically creative productivity in their field. So, you know, to translate the credits, because that's I know a very American thing. If you think about the amount of time they spend in their major field of study in their undergraduate, this is about a third. About a third of their major is spent in honors work. There is a co-curricular requirement called engagement in the field, and that is, again, major specific. So it will vary a lot between different fields of study of what makes sense to say that outside of the classroom you were engaged in your discipline, in your future profession. You might think about internships, attending conferences, symposia, presentations, that type of thing. And then again, the thesis or creative project, which I'll talk about next. That larger award, and really the one that is newer for us, is the University Honors Laureate Award. So this, you have to earn Honors Scholar in the major. So again, that's really embedded in University Honors Laureate. And then University Honors Laureate adds breadth, exploration, so much more intentional exploration of where do students want their creativity to flourish, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be in their major field. So they have an additional 15 credits, and what that does is takes their total up to 30, which is about a quarter of most undergraduate degrees. They have more requirements for those 30 credits, so the ones in the major and the ones outside, to distribute those credits among different areas. So they have to do arts and humanities. They have to do social sciences, STEM, so science, technology, engineering, or mathematics. They need at least 3 credits in diversity and multiculturalism. They have an interdisciplinary honors core course. So there's, again, this is that intentional exploration. There are 3 co-curricular requirements. The first one, honors events, is again about breadth. They have 10 events to do, and intentional reflection. And reflection is a big piece of our new requirements. But it's just, those events are distributed as well across categories like career, professional, and personal development, academic interdisciplinary engagement, social change, service, and sustainability, and that type of exploration. Academics in action and the leadership experience are again 2 more type 3 activities that'll be on future slides. So the first, and really what most people think of as the main type 3, is the thesis or creative project. And we've had a thesis for many, many years. I don't know if it was there 50 years ago when honors was founded. Maybe Jen can pipe up, but I know that it has been part of UConn honors for a very, very long time. And so that is part of Honors Scholar in the major. So that means that everybody who graduates from the UConn honors has done some sort of thesis, and we'll say or creative project, because when I say thesis, I don't mean necessarily a formal, a laboratory-based research project, or even, in the humanities, an inquiry-based written work. It can take a lot of forms, and that's going to vary again by discipline, and the departments do set their own specifications. Some require, specifically our lab sciences do tend to require a lab-based research component written in a formal style. But we are seeing more variety in that, both the process and the product for thesis. Like I even saw one, I want to say it was out of our Spanish department, but that the student's final thesis was a series of podcasts on a topic. Sadly, I am not fluent in Spanish, so I do not remember what that topic was. But again, that this was a way for the student herself to shape her product in a way that was relevant to her. And perhaps the spoken word was a better illustration of what she was attempting to convey than the written product would have been. The departments also set the amount of time involved. So we have a 3-credit minimum, so a equivalent of 1 course in 1 semester. Some may take 2 or 3 times that, depending on, again, are we talking about lab research? What's the scale? And it varies based on what's appropriate. What does it take to do creative work in that field? Perhaps your field requires more coursework, more intake of knowledge before you can really produce more. And some get the students involved in that creativity earlier. And so the creative process may take up to a year or more. So again, all students who graduate with either award have done that thesis. Then if you're doing the University Honors Laureate Award, there are 2 more type 3 activities. Academics in Action is a one-time enrichment experience. And we don't publish a list of pre-approved activities that work for Academics in Action. Instead, students, they undertake an activity. They may speak with people first to make sure they're on the right track. We give them coaching, and we have peer advisors that do some coaching on this as well. But they actually submit the reflection that tells us why what they did meets these 3 components. So it's academic in nature. So they intentionally applied content, methodology, or both from an academic field or an interdisciplinary area or an artistic domain. And it doesn't have to be their major, but they do need to be able to make that connection. There should be a defined product that was unique to the student. So the student should be able to tell us, this is what I made, and whether that's a tangible product, an experience for themselves or others, but something was created. And then a piece that was really critical for us was this authentic audience, that that when you are creating something that is going to be shared with others, regardless of what actually happens when you do the sharing. But just the act of knowing that it is going to be shared with a real audience, that you're going to be acting as a professional, it changes how you approach the task. And so this has to be something that they did not just do for a class. There has to have been that audience involved. Then they do, as I said, the structured reflection is when they tell us how did they fit this. It can be an extension of the thesis. So perhaps they take their thesis work and they repurpose it into a poster presentation, or to deliver it in a different format, because then again, that's that acknowledging your audience and creating a new product to reach that audience. But it can also be completely separate. We've had students do their Academics in Action as early as their first year. I think we've even had one their first semester. And then the leadership experience is larger. And this is the one that really, I think, gets closer to what we've talked about in terms of really getting them to think about their role in solving or helping to solve Pick a challenge. There are lots of them facing some community. And community is broad here. It can be their academic community, so they can continue to work in an academic field. They might be looking at their workplace, which could be a research lab, or it could be an outside the university job. It could be their home community. It can be a social group. There's lots of ways that students are coached to think about the idea of community. But that for them, we're talking about leadership isn't about having a position. And so this is, again, why even an undergraduate in a research lab can work to identify a change they'd like to see there, who they would need to work with to see that change, and to discuss to see, is that actually a change that would be valuable to the community versus just themselves? Are they on the right track? Who are the people that can help them? Who are the other people who are stakeholders, and what are their roles? And so really looking at leadership as change making rather than having a certain title. And this is a fairly long process. They have to sustain this project for a while, that there's multiple stages where they get a workshop where they talk about what is their leadership style and where do they want to grow, and really pull out what is it they want to do. Then there's a planning process where they work through identifying the community of practice they want to support and change, how they might figure out the problem they want to work on, and their approach, how they want to tackle that problem. So thinking about it from lots of areas. There's coaching with, again, we have trained peer advisors that do leadership coaching throughout this process. Then they have to enact the plan, and the plan itself, again, varying scales. Sometimes it turns out to be implementing a one-time event or initiative. Sometimes it's more structural change. But then after the closing, there's another reflection period, and it has nothing, but it's not based on whether they were, quote, successful in their leadership initiative. Did they actually get the change they wanted? Most of us don't the first time. And that's part of what they need to learn too, is what do you learn through failure? Or where do you find the successes that did happen, even if they weren't the ones you expected? And so it pushed them kind of in the center of change is a process and takes time, and also their own learning and growth takes time.
I want to add here, Jaclyn, can you go back one slide just before we leave the leadership experience? A couple of things. I think you can also see in this the elements of Houndstooth, and that really resonating through our planning and the leadership process. So, for example, taking a risk and potentially failing and reflecting on that failure will build courage. Jaclyn mentioned earlier, it's hard to teach courage. It's not difficult, though, to provide context and experiences for students that will give them opportunities to exhibit courage, right? To try something. And certainly with our students, we find that giving them spaces to take risks and to do that with peers, with true peer mates, age mates, helping to coach them through the process, feels a lot less scary than taking maybe an academic risk, or other places where their own performative nature and their drivenness, frankly, to perfection often is something that can sometimes stand in their own way of their growth and development. So two things that I do want us to mention before we move to our conclusion and open the floor for questions and answers. It's impossible to underscore the importance of honors peers in all of our new processes. We have honors peer facilitators who are part of our first year seminar program and teach our incoming first year students alongside faculty members, and we have for 18 years plus. So that has always been an influential part of this. But these new peer coaches, that we call them guides for peer success, or GPS is, there was a lot of debate over plurals and how we should pluralize GPS, but these are incredibly important staff members of ours. They are paid student employees. They go through extensive training, but they are really the ones who are helping to provide responses to the reflective questions we're asking students to submit about some of these experiences, the leadership experience, their academics in action experiences, even attending the variety of events that they need to attend across lots of different topic areas that Jaclyn mentioned earlier. And having near peers be part of that process has really been pivotal, not only from, frankly, a staffing and sustainability standpoint, because we generally graduate around 400 students a year in our honors program, so that is a lot of leadership experiences and academic in action reflections to read and review. But we find that this is certainly a growth opportunity and learning opportunity for those peer reviewers as well. And the learning piece of this, the reflective practice, is something that we also feel so strongly about in helping to model those behaviors for our students and encouraging them to continue to do that so that they are leaving us at UConn and leaving their their education with experiences that will help them remember to do this throughout their adult lives, right? It's certainly lifelong learning, but it's lifelong learning with a reflective piece, and a piece that asks them to think very critically about their communities, the process of change, how they can absolutely be members of society that are contributing to the better world that we all hope to see. The last thing I will mention quickly, and we can certainly talk more about this, we have employed an electronic portfolio system as a means of harnessing all of this information. So we do use a platform that allows for forms, contributions, reflections. Everything is sort of housed in one place that students have access to throughout their 4 years, and then we also have access to. So for us, this is another avenue where we expect we're going to have lots of data, lots of documents and data to analyze, students' own words in their reflective content, that is going to be part of how we understand the efficacy of our model and how it's working and how it needs to be changed, right? So certainly, this is, we're still in the middle of what I would think of as the learning process with this. We're about to enter this next academic year will be our 4th year under these new requirements. So we're really going to start to see the conclusion of the process and watching how students complete these awards for graduation very soon. So I think with that, I will stop. I see that there are questions, and Jaclyn, if you want to go ahead, our last slide just has our contact information. We will absolutely make these slides available for people if they'd like to see them. I know I'm someone who likes to go back and read and reflect a bit after I've had some time to think on things too. So we'll work with Marka and the conference organizers to do that. And I see that there are some open questions too, so we can start there and try to answer those. Jaclyn, do you have one queued up ready? And I'll start reading through. Oh, you're mute. Go ahead.
Oh, did I get it? Okay. Luckily, the first one is one that I can answer right away, is that you are correct that students submit a description afterwards, and we realized pretty quickly that students wanted the clarity of, but really, what about this thing? Will it work? Will it count before I do it? And we changed the process a little bit to basically allow them to submit a draft beforehand. So it still put the effort on them to tell us, this is academic, this is creative, and here's my authentic audience. But it allowed more structured conversation of, I would pass this on this phrase. This one, I still have some questions about, what would you need to change? So we did, in fact, have that come up.
Jaclyn, do you want to answer that question on creativity as well? the creative products?
So we are trying to go for a fairly broad definition of creativity. Even going down, I actually teach a first year one credit seminar on creativity, and what it really comes down to is you need to create something that is unique. So it needs to have something that did not exist before you did it, and it needs to be useful. So you need to be able to talk about the purpose, and aesthetic arts counts. Useful sounds very way too practical, but the arts counts as a purpose. It counts as a use. So that's what they need to be able to explain is, how is this new, and what was the purpose of it? So, I mean, they've been as traditional creativity, like one of the first academics in actions was a student in his first year put on a one-person comedy show. Just straight up had a good chunk of the first year honors class attend. Did this completely on his own. And he eventually graduated. He's been one of our first University Honors Laureate graduates. He graduated early and did great work in English and writing, and that's where he went. But we also have what you'd think of as the scientific creativity, which is your research, your presentations, papers, and so on. So it's still very broad.
So I wanted to, I noticed there's a question from John, which has to be John Z. John Z has to be the John Z I know, about structured reflection. So I'll try to answer that here too. So we do have reflection that is embedded. So for example, the forms that students go through in order to complete the leadership experiences has exact reflective questions that are at the end of the leadership experience. The same is true for academics in action. And those are generally evaluated, the leadership experiences are evaluated by our peers, by our peer reviewers who are serving in that coaching format in conjunction with the staff members who supervise them. So we have 2 staff members, full-time staff members who are part of the supervision structure for those 16 students. We'll have 16 students going into next academic year. And so they're the ones who are actually coaching students and helping them through in answering and responding to those reflective questions. Sometimes they have to be coached to go back to the student and say, this wasn't very reflective. You need to go do this again. And so they do have the ability to send things back into the system and essentially have students rework something or rethink something. The academics in action component, again, is evaluated through those types of standard reflection questions. The experience in the major field, though, that students participate in is something that's reflected on by their faculty in their major. So that is something that's more structured and formal in that it has a kind of traditional faculty oversight, but less structured in terms of the actual questions themselves. So faculty could absolutely choose whatever type of evaluative process they want to use to review that work from a student. The other thing that we've done is with our first year seminar classes, we have asked all of the faculty members who facilitate those classes to include one of 3 reflective questions as part of a final project that students are doing as somewhere in the assignments for that course. So that gives us the ability to look at reflective responses across the 30 or so courses that we offer, all on different topics, but also provides some continuity in terms of how those questions are embedded for us to look at the entirety of the first year seminar program and the reflective statements students are making, as part of their learning in those classes. Again, Jaclyn mentioned that she teaches 2 different classes, and the topics are incredibly wide-ranging. So we did want to institute a bit of structure into that to ensure that the reflections that students were providing could cross disciplinary boundaries, across those 30 different sections of that course. So long story short, feedback is provided from peers and students with staff oversight, and also faculty at a variety of points and places all along the 4 years. The thesis is a faculty-driven response as well, or creative project.
Jennifer, Jaclyn, thank you very much for your very interesting keynote. I have a question as well. Do you have examples or good practices of monitoring the impact on society or societal change?
That's a great question. So I wouldn't say that that's something that we have a formalized approach to yet. It is mostly self-reflection, and that students are doing the sort of work in that last bit of reflection after their leadership project to talk about what they believe to be the change. Is it sustainable? Is it a temporary change? Is it a small change, a big change? That sort of thing. But I wouldn't say that we yet have a formal structure for thinking about whether or not what the students have implemented is lasting, for example. But it's a really fantastic question, and something that I think we could look through the leadership experiences to do more research about and find ones that might fit. As you can imagine, because we want this to be completely individualized to the students, we're not the ones that are setting the tone or the topic or the opportunity out for them. We want them to think about what leadership skills they want to develop and what community of practice that they want to apply those developing skills toward. And so some of them are very individual. It's students who want to get better at leading a group, and the sort of change there might be on an individual scale, where we have other students who are looking at food deserts in their hometown, and they want to do a project that relates to addressing that concern. We're also very fortunate in that we have a very strong Office of Undergraduate Research that has a lot of funding for students to be able to apply for and enact additional projects. So we do have students who are, and maybe this is a good measure. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'll have to go back and take a look. But we do have students who will start a leadership activity early, and then or a research project, and then move that into other grant opportunities. So for example, we have one particular grant that is called an idea grant. That's a change grant, and it's really a way for students to impact societal change as part of getting funding to do a project that is aimed at societal change and community development. And so it would be interesting to see if there are any ties and links to students who are engaging early in that leadership experience with something like those other grants and opportunities.
And if I can add, the other area I think of is that from an assessment perspective, and really even from a goal, we want our students to learn how to be the change maker. The changes they make as undergrads may not be the ones that stick. It may be the ones they do 2 or 3 years from now. And so thinking about, are we trying to measure or talk about the changes they enact now, or their ability and willingness to do more later? And those are going to be different. And as Jen said, we're really just now getting into our last year of the first cohort. We also deal with the fact that, of course, this previous year has been not quite as we intended. So trying to figure out, which parts do we assess at which points with the constraints that we have. So I know that we've got a project launching soon that really just looks at the events. So really, it's the events requirement is one that's more limited scale in terms of what we want students to accomplish from it. But on the other hand, it's when each student is doing 10 events with journals. And so really digging into the content of those journals and what students are doing. So assessment is definitely one of the next pieces to plant more firmly and I think questions about are we looking at student learning or student impact is going to have to be one of those questions.
Very much, and time is running out. I'm sorry to say. I don't see any more questions in the Q&A. I want to thank you again for this wonderful presentation and this nice kickoff of our conference. Thank you very much. I would like to close this session and wish you a very good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.